First of all, as Niedzwiecki mentioned, I have to apologise for my inability to speak your beautiful language. You have my presentation here in your language. I'm sure this will help to explain the message we are bringing forward this evening. You heard from Dr. Niedzwiecki about some of the marvellous advances in natural health research that are currently taking place at the Rath Research Institute in California. With knowledge of this information, one would think that governments all over the world would be hurrying to take advantage of this research. In fact, of course, as we know, this is not in fact the case. In fact, as I will be explaining this evening, governments, and particularly at a European level, what we call the Brussels EU, are actively taking steps to prevent us from accessing these therapies. So my presentation this evening will describe some of the key threats to natural therapies. I will also explain where these threats are coming from and why. I will describe some of the historical roots of these threats. I will explain where in history the roots of these attacks on our health come from. And finally, I will expand on some of the ideas explained by Dr. Niedzwiecki in terms of ways in which you can help yourselves and us to fight back. So to begin, let's have a look at some of the key threats to natural health. I should say there are many, but there are three key threats in Europe that we need to be very aware of. The first one is something called the Food Supplements Directive. This is a piece of European legislation. It started life coming from the Brussels EU. And its aim is to set restrictions on the types and the doses of vitamins and minerals that can be contained in supplements. But to hide this threat, to try to lead you to believe that this will be done scientifically, the Brussels EU is pretending that there is a scientific method in place that will bring about a scientifically valid dose for each individual nutrient. In fact, however, the methodologies that the Brussels EU will be using to calculate these levels are deeply unscientific and very, very flawed. But of course, this is deliberate. I'll say right away, this is no accident. The fact that these methods for setting low amounts of these vitamins and minerals is so flawed is not at all an accident. The second key threat is something called the Traditional Herbal Medicinal Products Directive. And this, again, is a piece of European legislation, and this started out life in 2004. And what this does, this subjects natural herbal medicines to a very restrictive regulatory regime, whereby all herbs that do not specifically get authorization from the Brussels EU are banned. Just like that. So by destroying your access to herbal medicine in this way, the EU's goal, as we shall see in a little while, is to protect the interests of the pharmaceutical industry. That's it. That's the goal. But that is not all, because in the attempt to curtail even the spreading of information about these therapies, the Brussels EU has passed something called a regulation on nutrition and health claims. And under this legislation, all suggestions that a particular food or nutrient has beneficial properties, or even that there's a relationship between food, nutrition and health, are banned unless specifically authorised by the European Commission. And get this, even if scientific evidence for the claim exists. So, to the Brussels EU, it doesn't matter that there is scientific evidence to prove that a specific group of nutrients, let's say, have an effect, a positive effect upon cancer. That doesn't matter. The fact that there's evidence to the Brussels EU is besides the point, because the aim is to ban such claims, ban the communication of this information. So, straight away we can learn something very important from this, because in its desperation to protect the pharma industry, the Brussels EU is resorting to the most distinctive hallmark of all dictatorships, and that's a prohibition on free speech. So let's take a little closer look now at the source of these threats. The source of these threats is the pharmaceutical industry, but what you need to understand is that there is a very close relationship between the Brussels EU and the pharmaceutical industry. So close, in fact, is this relationship that 3 years ago, the Brussels EU openly announced its ambition to become what it called the pharmacy of the world. And I should say that those are not my words. I haven't made this phrase up. This was actually used at the press conference when the scheme was launched. The scheme involves currently around 2 billion euros, and it offers grants to universities and to drug companies. And the European Commission is contributing 1 billion euros of taxpayers' money, our money, to this scheme. Because what it wants is to enable drug companies to advertise their products directly to us on television, the radio, the internet, newspapers, throughout the EU. Contrast that with the way it is treating information about nutrition and health claims, as I described earlier. This is no accident.